Welcome to episode 4, reliving the mass shooting at Chabad Poway, April 27, 2019. In the previous episode, I relived and shared with you in real time from the moment the terrorists breached our synagogue until the first responders and the paramedics arrived. The sermon that I gave standing on that chair was a sermon that I've never given before in my life, with such emotion and such conviction and commitment and just unconditional love and compassion and empathy to all of the members of the congregation who have just survived the worst day of their life. Just survived the second mass shooting of a synagogue in all United States history. This happened in real time. My heart goes out to all the members of the congregation that were there that day, and those that were almost there. My wife, my eldest son, and my youngest daughter were walking down to the synagogue. There's 1,200 feet from our home to the synagogue. When they got about 100 feet close to the synagogue, they saw the terrorist. At first they thought that was security. But as they got closer, within minutes of getting to the sidewalk, which is the entrance to the synagogue, they heard the shots. They immediately ran for shelter. And one can only ponder or imagine if they would have left the house 3 minutes earlier, they would have been in the lobby. My dear wife, my eldest son, and my youngest daughter, who just got married 2 weeks before, the bride. They would have been in the lobby. One could only imagine what would have happened. Those 3 minutes difference between life and death. King David writes in the book of Psalms, God decides man's footsteps. Man's footsteps is predetermined by God Almighty, divine providence, where we're going to be, where we need to be geographically. As the paramedics came and the first responders were there, the whole street was blocked off, and the sheriff arrived via helicopter, press arrived, pandemonium was all over. But I was ushered into the ambulance together with Mr. Dahan, whose 2 daughters were hit by shrapnel, and Mr. Almug, who also was hit with the shrapnel. They were in the banquet hall behind me. We all went in one ambulance. What happened after that with the congregation? This is the most amazing event that occurred. Knowing with the words Am Yisroel Chai, the nation of Israel lives, nothing's going to stop us. The congregation went downstairs to my son's home, Rabbi Mendel, whose home neighbors the parking lot of the synagogue. And they brought with them 2 Torahs. And they continued the prayer service. Yes, they did not stop. They continued reading from the Torah where they left off. And they read the Haftorah, the one that I was going to read from Isaiah. One could only imagine the emotions, what it was like to continue reading the Torah just moments after surviving a mass shooting, a massacre at our synagogue. The congregants remained there till the end of service. They recited the Yizkor memorial service. At the time, we did not know that Lori Kaye's life ended, that she was killed and slaughtered. However, the memorial service was recited for those who came to recite the memorial service. Followed by Kiddush was provided for the members of the congregation. One could only imagine what it was like for the members of the congregation who were sitting in the sanctuary. They woke up that morning and they came to synagogue just to pray, just to do the right thing, just to do what a Jew is supposed to do on a Saturday morning, last day of Passover. And they came and they prayed. And they were finishing up a beautiful Passover celebration, only to be afflicted with man's worst nightmare, to be a victim of terrorism right here in the United States of America, right here in the quiet town of Poway in northern San Diego, California. One would have never imagined that this could have befallen us. The anguish and pain of realizing how a mass shooting, what it does to us emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, for those of us that were injured. But then to realize, to go through all the phases, from denial to anger to acceptance, and then to appreciation, realizing how lucky we are, how lucky we were. This terrorist, when he breached our synagogue, he came with every intention to kill all of us, to exterminate us, to eradicate us. That was his intention. That's what he wrote in his manifesto, and that's what he reported when he surrendered. He came to wipe us off from the earth. He did not succeed. Our hearts go out to Lori Kaye's family, to her sisters, her parents, her father, her husband, her daughter. The scar will always be there. But we all know, and they all know, she died as a martyr. She died a hero. Her soul went straight to heaven. Her life ended at 60 years old. But her deeds will continue on forever. She died for us. She literally took the first bullets on herself. One can ponder, if she wasn't there, the shooter would have gone to the sanctuary and emptied out his rounds in the sanctuary where 50 of us were present. One could only imagine what that would have been like. But Lori taking the first 4 bullets, how many people she saved with that? I survived, and I'm grateful for that every day. I've dealt with a lot of survivor's guilt, but I turned it into an energy to know that for the rest of my life, I will not only never forget this moment, never forget Lori, never forget what my congregation has gone through, but I'm going to spend every alive day, every waking moment, to try to do good and better for the world. No matter what my life was before then, I have changed and transformed to a total different person, to a total different human being. I have retired from my 40 years as being a rabbi. My son, Rabbi Mendel, is my successor, who will continue on the legacy. However, I am going to spend the rest of my life, whatever days and years God gives me, to spread light into the world, to share with the world my experiences. The reminder of the 2 fingers that were gone are going to be gone forever, but the reminder will never be gone, because I will live every day to the fullest. I'm living every day as transformed, as a new person, because God gave me a bonus round of life. From this near-death experience, you wake up and you realize how lucky you are. And you're so much more careful with everything that you do to make sure that everything you do is proper and correct, and to be an upstanding, good, kind, sensitive, generous person. This is my life. And I want to share with you, as you continue on listening to the episode, what happened from the moment my body moved from my home, our synagogue, that my wife and I built from ground up. Our heart and soul, and now our blood, went into this building. The amount of energy, commitment, and dedication to build this community center and to sustain it. The pitfalls that I found myself in, the troubles I have found myself in, trying to do whatever I can to sustain and keep it going for all these years. It all came together at that moment. At that moment, the heavenly court must have decided that I should continue on living. I'm in the ambulance together with these two little girls. One of them just survived cancer, a young 10-year-old, and now she survives a mass shooting. We're in the ambulance. I took with me a prayer book and my prayer shawl because I did not finish my services yet. The ambulance with the sirens going. I resisted leaving at first. I just couldn't leave my congregants. My congregants is my family. In addition to my children and my grandchildren who were there, my wife that was there, all the congregants, I love them. They are my flesh and blood, just like family. And I felt terrible leaving them. But the paramedics said that I must be rushed to trauma surgery to save whatever is left. And I was bleeding profusely, and they had to stop the bleeding on both of the fingers. In the ambulance, I look at Mr. Dahan, Mr. Perez, and we realize how fortunate we are to have survived the bullets. We had these 4 high-powered AR-15 bullets flying in our directions, and we survived it. I lost 2 fingers, but these little kids with their shrapnel and their emotional scars that they're going to have to live with. But we're all in the ambulance going together. I still did not know what the status of Lori Kaye is. I arrive at the hospital and they bring me straight to the trauma center. In the triage area of the trauma center at Palomar Hospital, I'm laying there in the bed in total shock. Did not have any pain at all from the lost limbs. Just trying to process what all happened. When in walks in a familiar face. Dr. Uri Raz. He's a young man that I've known him since he was a teenager. And watched him go through medical school and watched him become a doctor. He came in to give me a hug and to share with me some heartfelt words. It was so comforting to see a familiar face when I felt so lost. I felt so abandoned, and I felt so alone, not knowing what's happening. The details of the shooter, the details of are there any other casualties. I was in the dark, did not know. And being that it was Saturday and it was a holiday, I did not have my phone with me. I had no way of communicating with anybody. And I was laying there in the gurney in anguish, emotional, spiritual anguish of trying to take stock of what just happened. What did I just live through? Look how I was standing in front of an AR-15, 4 high-powered bullets come flying towards me, and I survived. And I'm laying here in a bed with both my hands bandaged, but I survived. The sheriff department arrives and takes my shoes, takes whatever clothes I had blood on for their investigation. They took the prayer shawls that was blood-soaked, and they asked me, and I didn't have really much to recall at that moment, but I shared with them whatever I saw, whatever I knew. And then the surgeons came. 2 surgeons arrived. Dr. Arush Patel, who is a trauma hand surgeon, and Dr. Yael Kadetsky. And they were both going to work separately on both hands, trying to save whatever they could save. And they told me at the beginning that the right finger is gone. There's nothing they could do about it. The left finger, they will try to see whatever they can do to save it. In the meantime, Ori Raz came in to talk to me, and he told me that Lori Kaye has died. It was the worst news I could have imagined. Just an hour before, I'm standing and talking to her. We're smiling at each other. And then she shot dead right in front of me. I was the last face she saw. With a smile. And now she's dead. Slaughtered, killed, exterminated by hate, anti-Semitism of the worst kind in our home. The synagogue that she helped build. The synagogue that she secured us up building loan with. The synagogue that she supported and came and lived her life in for the last 23 years. And here she's dead. It was the worst news for me. I asked where Lori's daughter was, and they went to get her. I got out of my gurney. By then the blood was already stopped, the bleeding stopped, my hands were wrapped. I got out of the gurney with my IV. I asked for a private room. I went into a private room, and I spoke to Hannah face to face, heart to heart. What do you tell a daughter, an only daughter, who just lost her mother? I was in the hospital when Lori gave birth to Hannah. I was from the first to hold her in my hands and say the Shema prayer with her. Hannah spent almost every Saturday growing up at our house. And she was very close, dear friends to our daughter, our only daughter. I look at her and I share with her my thoughts and whatever inspiration God gave me to tell a daughter who has just lost her mother in a mass shooting and a terrorist attack. I will never forget those moments. I certainly hope that Hannah doesn't either. To realize and recognize the special connection and where my heart and soul has always been and is always there, will always be there. After I finished my talk with Hannah, just sobbing in tears, uncontrollable, of this tragedy, the doctors came looking for me, getting me prepped for surgery. Before they did that, I said I need to finish my prayers. I had the prayer book with me, with my prayer shawl, lying in the gurney. I recited the prayers that I didn't end up doing in the synagogue. Those prayers were so different than I've ever prayed before. The near-death experience really, really helps you appreciate the prayers that you could say after you survive a near-death experience. I pray to God with heartfelt sobs, just heartbroken over this whole terrible tragedy. An event that should have never happened, but it happened. And it happened to me, it happened to our congregation. And I kept on thinking about the members, how traumatized they must be. The little kids that were traumatized that were there, the elderly, the family members, when we all dispersed and ran for our lives. There were many that were unaccounted for. Some kids went to a neighbor's house and no one even knew where they were. It was such pandemonium, such chaos, such terror that our congregation had to go through. When I finished my prayers, the doctor says it's time to go. The sedation was given to me. And the next thing I knew is when I woke up in recovery. And that was after many hours of surgery, reconstructive surgery, to reconstruct my fingers. When I woke up already, it was dark. The Sabbath has ended. The holiday has ended. I was anxiously waiting for my family to arrive, for my wife to arrive. And in episode 4, I will share with you the beginning of the recovery, the beginning of the reaction of how does one react to a mass shooting that just happened hours before. Where do you go from here? How do you deal with the near-death experience? How do you deal with the death, the loss of a dear friend, of a member, a congregant, a philanthropist, one of the most kindest people you ever known, Mrs. Lori Kaye? How do you deal with a congregation who's just been shattered with trauma? How do we deal? Where do we go from here? What is the calling? What is the message? What do I tell the world? God bless you. God loves you.